This next presenter has a unique desire for sci-fi, an outspoken love for games, and a kind of quirky passion for data. There's no doubt Cool Colin is one of a kind. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Colin Rideout.
Waking up can be hard. I'm probably not alone in feeling a certain resentment towards alarm clocks. Now, imagine how you might feel to wake up each morning and see the sun rise on the far side of a barred window. In those first few moments of consciousness, I've experienced everything from helpless rage to crushing loneliness, and that's before the day even gets started. It's said that life is a cruel teacher who gives the test first and the lesson second. Mark Twain reportedly said that education is what's left after we've forgotten everything we learned in school. And I would add that wisdom seems to be what's left after we've failed the tests life throws at us. There's a prayer which goes, "Lord, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference." I may not be especially wise, but I do feel that I've developed some insight into what it is we can and can't control in life. The upside of being deprived of the normal agency over my life is that I was forced to focus very narrowly on the things within my control. Many of us operate with an illusion of control over our lives, feeling like we can plan everything out. That illusion is easily shattered by a car crash, a sudden illness, or in my case, being thrown into prison and losing almost all control over the conditions of my life. Some expert climbers talk about staying in a 3-foot world, focusing only on the next set of handholds. Now, I would point out the graph search problems associated with only considering adjacent nodes, but life probably can't be solved with an algorithm yet. Each of us can only act in this particular moment, and often frustratingly, we can't control or even necessarily anticipate the actions of everyone around us. I began to learn this as a coxswain in high school and college. While technically I was in charge of the boat, I could only turn the rudder. Everything else depended on either the rowers in my boat or the crews of the other shells on the water. It's only in hindsight that I began to appreciate what profound lessons I might have learned. No matter how detailed your race plan, you can't stop other boats from drifting into your lane or blocking you on a turn. The success of the boat depends on the efforts and choices of others, not just yourself. One lesson life only bothers to teach after you've failed the test is that sometimes nothing you say or do can change someone else's feelings. My engagement fell apart in the months after I came to prison, ending a 7-year relationship I had thought would last the rest of my life. Accepting that my fiancé's feelings had changed was a very hard lesson, but one which highlighted what I was able to control versus what was in the hands of others. I learned a lot growing up as the oldest of 7 children. Few things in life are more frustrating than seeing a younger sibling take their life in a harmful direction. You may offer advice, you may yell at them, you may even try to put in some of the work for them, but ultimately, you can only set the example. Other people have to help themselves first. I've also realized, in the immortal words of Cool Hand Luke, that there's some people you just can't reach. I experienced this with a kid I met when I entered the county jail following trial. Without going into excessive detail, he had some substance abuse issues and some anger problems, but also a 2-year-old son. And when I met him, my older brother instincts kicked in, and I encouraged him to take advantage of an opportunity he had to complete a drug treatment program instead of a prison term. Unfortunately, he attempted suicide and was hospitalized. Well, I wrote him a letter the next day, trying to offer support and encouraging him to focus on his son. And it seemed to me that he could chart a course forward by completing the treatment program, and finding a healthy outlet for his negative emotions. As a disclaimer, I'm in no way professionally qualified to dispense advice on handling mental health issues, but to my reasoning, the solution seemed relatively straightforward. Instead, he returned from the hospital and proceeded to barter borrowed property as collateral for drugs, running up numerous debts before signing into protective custody to avoid repayment. That was the last I ever saw of him. I felt like I'd failed him, but was also offended that he had apparently ignored my attempt to help and made zero effort to help himself. It was some time before I was able to accept that I could only extend a hand to help. He had to live his own life and make his own choices. I find that running is very useful in training myself to focus only on the things within my immediate control. It's simpler than rowing and can be done just about anywhere, except zero gravity. When I run, initially 1,000 thoughts buzz through my mind, whether Tyrion should sit the Iron Throne, or if that yelling was the start of a fight breaking out. And after a mile or two, those thoughts fade into the background, and running becomes a form of meditation for me. Brandon Sanderson wrote that the most important step in a journey is not the first, but always the next step. This is a poignant expression of where the limit of our control truly lies. Each of us can only take the next step, reach for the next handhold, make a conscious decision in this moment, because the past is immutable and the future unknowable. Limits are often perceived as holding us back, but the most creative solutions are the result of working within the constraints of a given problem. The benefit of being deprived of normal agency over my life is that I was forced to focus very narrowly on my internal state of mind, on my responses to the factors outside my control. Mark Devine's practice of a mind sentinel, or cognitive checkpoint, is very useful for this. I adapted the practice to my personal philosophy, which resembles less of an ideal Platonic form and more of a hoarder's basement. It consists of actively listening to my internal dialogue, the thoughts which shape my self-perception, and consciously choosing which ones to internalize and which ones to reject. While performing this examination, I find that most sources of stress are beyond my control, and I'm able to act with more purpose and intention in each moment. I think of these decision points as opportunities for 1% wins, tiny steps which compound over time, much the way the sun gradually lightens the sky each morning on the other side of that barred window. On that note, my call to action is simple. It has to do with how you begin the day tomorrow. The military advocates that you start by making your bed properly, but I've found it's impossible to put hospital corners on a prison cot. Instead, I choose to begin the day by consciously smiling. It isn't always easy, and initially feels ridiculous. But there's a strong feedback loop between the mind and body, and gradually, my smile stops feeling forced and becomes genuine. When I begin the day with this affirmative act of willpower, I find it's easier to perceive the limits of my own agency, to focus on the choices I do have, and to ignore external sources of stress. I would encourage each of you to try it for yourself first thing tomorrow. Thank you.